Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the channel. And I hope you had a great weekend and got refreshed, got a little bit of rest. I uploaded a couple of montages over the weekend, and we're going to go over one of those today. Loki and the Time Trees. So this was a series that just released a few weeks ago. It's from the Marvel Universe, and several of you asked me to look at it. Now, before we get into this, understand that the word reset, R-E-S-E-T, when you scramble that word, it spells trees. Now, what could that mean? What is the reset being a tree? Well, I think you might see as we get into this decode today. Now, I want to be clear because decodes like this, their purpose is not to find truth in the devil's entertainment. Rather, we read between the lines to see how the devil is programming and deceiving even some of God's people. Everybody watches entertainment. Most people do anyway, including what we call mainstream Christianity. And these subliminal messages that are passed underneath the radar are the ones that are the most damaging because you don't see it coming. Whether we like it or not, entertainment is our reality. And we have to face these lies to overcome them. So let's get into Loki. Now, I'm going to go over a little bit of the plot before we get into the actual montage, because this is very important. So Loki, of course, is the god from the Marvel Universe. He's the god of mischief. And in the storyline, it picks up after he escapes his captives and launches into time using a blue box, which is a Tesseract. Now, if you look at this word Tesseract, it actually, are we live, you guys? Give me a thumbs up if we're live here. I just want to make sure you guys are with me before we keep going with this, and we'll talk about the Tesseract. Sometimes we hit the live button and it doesn't go live, so let's make sure you guys are with us first. Hey, Tam, hey, Terry, Mr. H, there's Tom, Lori, we are live. Thanks, Tom. So, Loki is the god of mischief, and he has this Tesseract. Now, when you look at the Tesseract, this is the original Tesseract. The term was coined in 1888 by Charles Howard Hinton in a book, The New Era of Thought. Now, this Howard Hinton, this H and H, is significant because they are the alphanumerically the number 8. So you get an 8 and an 8. We're going to get more into that as the show progresses. But the book was also made famous by, the Tesseract was also made famous by a book called A Wrinkle in Time. It doesn't mention it here in the Tesseract Wikipedia article, which is interesting. You would think that they would because it is mentioned in the book. But it was made famous by A Wrinkle in Time. So this 88 is very important. Now, in the series, they call the Tesseract the Blue Box. And according to the Marvel Universe, it was first found in a Viking ruin under a mural of the world tree called Yggdrasil. Now, this is the world tree, Yggdrasil. Now, remember these tree references. Yggdrasil is the world tree, and for those of you that have followed this channel, you know that this looks very familiar. It looks like our enclosed world under the firmament, with a tree going up through the middle, which is the tree of life, but we're cut off from it. There are other trees in the garden as well that we have no access to because we're stuck in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, the story continues as Loki escapes the Avengers using the Tesseract, the blue box, but he finds himself imprisoned again by this weird agency that controls time. And their job is to basically control the timeline. And if there's any parts of the timeline that are corrupted, they will prune them, basically send them off into a different part of the timeline so the timeline can continue. Now, here's one of the first people that Loki meets at this bureau. The bureau is called the TVA. And the receptionist's name is Casey. Listen.
Oh, what's your name?
Casey.
Give me the Tesseract or I'll gut you like a fish, Casey.
What's a fish? Hey, I know you. You're that criminal with the blue box.
Death, Casey. Violent, painful death.
Okay, I comply.
How do you not know what a fish is?
I lived my entire life behind a desk.
But what difference does it make?
So, this is weird, right? Now, Casey takes care of the office and the front desk for the timekeepers. It's weird. It's like this bureaucracy. They're literally all sitting in these offices. They've got filing cabinets, and they're all just basically managing time, right? Now, I'm not going to speculate on whether this is a joke on us or not, or some kind of trolling or whatever. But I thought you guys would get a kick out of how they depict Casey, right? As this inept, irrelevant administrator with no friends, sitting behind a desk his whole life. And it's kind of weird how my birthday's on the 88th day of the year, March 29th, linking back into time and space. I, of course, didn't choose my birthday, but we've done a lot of studies on how people fit into this life on the spiritual level. And who knows what this is about. Now, a few years ago, we discovered that the name Casey could be a mockery of Christ. When you spell it backwards and you rotate the C into a U, it spells, or can spell, Yeshua. And so this could be a Christian slur or a slur against Christ, if you think of it in that way. Now, obviously, they're talking about Christ here, right? Because you heard him just mention a fish, and he doesn't know what the fish is, but he's supposed to, because the fish was the age that Jesus was born in. He was born in the earth age of Pisces, the two fish. Now, if you're a believer, before you run off and think, oh, Casey's talking about astrology, I do not believe in astrology. And our name of our channel has nothing to do with astrology. But understand that there is what's called progression in the sky. And every 2,000 or so years, a different constellation, some of which God named. He named Orion. Orion is actually in the Bible, as well as a couple other constellations are mentioned in the book of Job. They talk about the Mazzaroth. They talk about the Pleiades. They talk about Arcturus. All of those are in the Bible. And every 2,000 years, there is a dominant constellation on the horizon. I believe it's either east or west, the rising or setting sun. I can't remember. And it stays there for about 2,000 years until the next one comes into frame. It's like looking through, film, like a film reel. So, during the time of Christ, these two fish, Pisces, were on the horizon. Okay? And of course, there were many fish miracles that Jesus performed. He took two fish, which is the same symbol of Pisces. He fed an entire crowd. This happened 2 or 3 times in the Bible. Of course, his whole ministry was about water. It was about baptism. He turned water into wine. He met a woman at a well, which is full of water. He walked on water, and there were water was his ministry. He talked about being in the Spirit in order to be baptized by water and the Spirit to go to heaven, to enter the kingdom of heaven. So, Loki is mocking him, right? And he tells him, you're going to have a violent, painful death. And of course, this would be the crucifixion, Jesus dying on the cross. So let's move on to the next part of this montage and continue with the plot. Now, the Bureau explains to Loki that a dark side version of him, which is what they call a variant. Now, I don't know if this was filmed before the mainstream media started talking about variants, but isn't it odd that any people that are not in the timeline officially are called variants? Isn't that weird? So Loki finds out that there's another version of him, which is a woman, and she's messing up the timeline. And if they don't stop her, then the universe will branch off too much and there will be chaos again in the universe. So they jump in time to this period festival, and it's in Wisconsin. When I say period festival, we've all seen these before, where people dress up like they're in the old times, and they've got, barns, and it's like it's like a throwback to history, right? And lo and behold, Loki goes into the timeline to this place in Wisconsin. The first thing you see is a Maypole. Watch.
I want to know exactly what I'm being threatened with before I comply. Comply? Jeez.
Now, here's the Maypole, and we know that the nursery rhyme Ring Around the Rosie originated from the Maypole. And we know that the Maypole is all about human sacrifice on May 1st of the witch's calendar. Highest day of sacrifice, as a matter of fact. First or second highest day. And where did we see this Maypole before? Well, we saw it in the film Midsommar. And that film was all about flowers as well. Now, what do the flowers represent? Flowers represent the fruitful part of the plant. They flower and then the seeds come out. It's a fertility festival. Flowers also, believe it or not, are the first thing before a vegetable or fruit is born. So that's what this is all about. Now, I think you're beginning to understand why American May Day falls on May 1st. Because it's about sacrifice. Watch. Now, I was watching another film, another Marvel film as a matter of fact, and it was so terrible that I didn't finish it. It was Black Widow. But I got about 30 minutes into it, and in the opening credits of Black Widow, they depicted this exact same Maypole. What are the odds of that? Two separate films, both showing the Maypole. Now, in this context, it's about the origination of these child super soldiers, of which Black Widow was one of them.
Communities, they took on false identities, even raised families to
Now, if this was a film about Satanism, this would be fine in its context. But instead, this is a film about little girls who become super soldiers. So this is very cringy and very weird. And if you didn't slow it down like I just did, you would never know what you just looked at, right? And so there's something wrong with our society. There's something wrong with Hollywood as they keep glorifying this kind of thing, which is very cringy and weird.
Reset charges prune the affected radius of a branched timeline.
So, Loki's explaining how all this works. Now, let's back up to the Maypole. Now, if you don't know about the Maypole and you want to learn more about it, there's a Wikipedia page. Here it is here. I'll put a link to it. But it's well established that this symbolism of the Maypole went back to human sacrifice. The Wikipedia article might not show all the details of this because they're trying to change, the history of this. But they admit that it was pagan tradition. And this was about sacred trees. So now you know why they put the Maypole in Loki. And many of you are probably wondering, how is this the case? Look, they even mention Yggdrasil here, which we just covered, the world tree. Okay, so that's what all links back to. But you're probably wondering, wow, Casey, this is deep. Like, had we not seen this decode video, this goes over 90% of most people's heads. So what's the point of it? Why are they embedding all of these deep themes that 95% of the people that go watch this movie have no idea? The only people that are going to pick up on this are the pagans themselves, right? And they're just laughing it up. They're going, haha, they stuck a maypole in there. We know what that's about. Now, of course, there are a lot of pagans that don't see the maypole that way. They're like pagan light, let's call them. But if they were really to dig into this, this was all about the return of summer, midsummer. This was all about the day with the most light, sun worship in the northern countries near the Arctic Circle. This was about the Vikings. It was about Yggdrasil and all these other things. And in its root, sacrifice to the sun god is what is at the root of all this. And it's just been going on for a very, very long time. Now here's where the plot thickens. And the enemy starts to brag about his knowledge of the tree that we are stuck in. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And yes, we are stuck in a time tree. Events that happen are like branches that bear fruit. So this is actions and reactions. And when you account for the fruit, it dictates the consequences of those actions. Do you guys remember the verse in the Bible? You will know them by their fruit. Here it is here. Every tree that bringeth forth not good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. So this is all about the fruit of the womb. It speaks about in the Bible as well. Everything is based off of trees. That is at the base of our reality. And where basically time is a thing. Maybe time's different in different trees, but in our tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we're locked in a time line, I guess you can call it. Now, it's been many years of research to finally get down to the bottom of this and looking at all the terminology in our reality as well as the Bible. When a child is emerging from the cervix, they are crowned. They're crowning. Trees have crowns. We have limbs, arms and legs. We have a core or a trunk, the trunk of your body, it's often called. Right? What else do we have? We set down roots in places, do we not? We have a family tree. And it goes on, and I could speak for hours about all of the analogies that why do you think that is? It's because we are in a tree, a spiritual tree. Now, I'm not literally saying we're sitting on branches or something. I'm saying we're in a spiritual tree. Now, let's keep going with this. Now, God knew that if Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she would die. Now, how did he know that? Well, of course, one, because he's God and he knows everything, right? But he also knew that when creation entered a place where they were given a choice to do evil, especially they didn't even know what evil was yet, that we would choose evil. We would choose sin. And that sin has to be atoned for by the laws of action and reaction. And this is why God required animal sacrifice for sin until Jesus came and became the sacrifice of all sacrifices, right? That is because sin has to be atoned for. Every time someone does something to something, there has to be a balance restored. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've learned not to double guess, God, because he's God, right? And when we were in the garden, we were around many trees, but only one gave you the choice to do evil. Look at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as the choice tree. But there was a choice before the choice tree, wasn't there? The choice was whether or not creation wanted to obey God or by not eating or entering that tree. Once that happened, once we entered the tree, the cascade of sin began. And the Bible tells us we were born into sin. We're born into this tree. And that's when the timeline began. Now, after years of considering this, and it finally settled in, I was amazed by this, that we're born and live and die in a timeline. Time is much different outside of this tree, which is why when you're not in this tree, you don't die anymore, you live forever. Now, Loki describes time as a tree here with branches, and he talks about bad parts of the tree being pruned away. Pruning is a reference to a plant. He also says the word reset, which again, when you scramble that word, it spells trees. Let's listen to this again.
Reset charges prune the affected radius of a branched timeline, allowing time to heal all its wounds.
And there is the depiction.
Allowing time to heal all its wounds.
As you can see, the timeline starting to branch off just like a tree.
It's not possible. Which, by the way, sounds like a nice way of saying disintegrate everything in its vicinity.
And if you see a Loki, prune it.
The bad Loki, preferably.
And that brings us to a couple of rune symbols that appear in the series. I believe this is the Degas rune symbol. It's depicted on the doors of an elevator. And this rune symbol means time. It's shaped like an hourglass. And it also means a monarch butterfly. Now, this symbol is found only one place. It's found only one place in antiquity. And it's in an explanation about how the rising sun gives men comfort. Now, time is measured by the sun, so this makes sense in the context of this series, Loki, right? But what is the significance of the elevator? Now, the elevator in the series is used to transport down to what we're going to talk about next. The three lizards. So there's the Degas rune symbol.
Once I isolated our timeline, all I have to do is manage the flow of time and prevent any further branches.
Now, we'll get into the rest of that a little bit later in the show, but here, Loki teams up with his other Loki because they realize that the Bureau is a scam and that they've been lied to. And here they find the original timekeeper, the guy that set this whole thing in motion, and they decide to take him out. But look behind the timekeeper. What you're going to see are 3 elements of 6 in the stained glass. And that represents, of course, 666. So what do I mean, 3 elements in the stained glass? Well, first of all, you've got 6 dots.
And I ended the multiversal war. Hence the timekeepers in a highly efficient bureaucracy. Hence ages and ages of cosmic harmony.
So there are 6 dots. There are 6 teardrops going in one direction and 6 teardrops going in the other direction. So you have 6 and a 6 and a 6, which is the beast, which is time. It's the Ouroboros. The serpent rules this tree of good and evil. He rules this timeline, and God tells us that the devil rules this world, which is why he was able to offer all the kingdoms of earth to Jesus when he tempted Jesus. Now you're also going to notice that these 6 dots are in the hexagram or hexagon formation, And there's another 6 there if you want to add one there. So Loki learns the backstory of the Bureau, or at least what he was told, about how time was ruled. He's told that it was 3 magic lizards who gained control of the timeline simply to restore order. So obviously this is blasphemy of the original and true timekeepers, the Elohim. Now I know for a fact that God and Jesus were part of the Elohim. How do I know that? Because Colossians tells us, Colossians 1:16, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. From the beginning, it's all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him. So Jesus was there at creation and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So the very fabric of our universe is created in the image of Christ. Maybe this is where, what is it, laminin or whatever you guys found, which looks like a cross. Also, we've looked at the body code and how Jesus seems to appear in our physiology and anatomy, in the visual description, like in our spine, in the brain, different parts of the brain that we looked at. And, the optic nerves crossing in the middle, which looks like the crucifixion, and the 2 eyes being the thieves. That's all in our body code series that we looked into. And we were comparing the human anatomy to the Bible. And in fact, it is in the image of Christ, our flesh. So this explains it here in Colossians 1:16. Now notice, I believe he was born on the 11th day of September. So when you flip this around, that's what you get. Now obviously, they numbered these verses and chapters after the Bible was made. So I don't want to read too much into that. But that's pretty interesting, right? Now, so we know that Jesus and God were both at creation, forming part of the Elohim. But some postulate there was a third. There was more to the Elohim than just Jesus and God. Some say it's the Holy Spirit, which would form the 3, while others say that the Holy Spirit is simply God's power, that it is not an entity. And all of this, you got to look in the Bible and pray to God about this. I don't claim to know anything for a matter of fact. I'm simply putting the puzzle pieces together. There are some, actually, that believe that the devil himself was one of the third. I don't know if I believe that, but it could make sense if if he was responsible for a third of it. And if there's any biblical verses that contradict that, please put them in the chat. So I don't want to spread things that aren't true. But it would make sense that if a third of the angels fell with him from heaven, that he could have been one of the 3. But obviously Jesus and God formed 2/3, and God is all powerful. He created everything. So he would, overcome any kind of resistance in that way. So those are the different theories on who the Elohim are. So you, again, pray to God about it, for him to reveal the truth, open your Bible, and he will make things clear for you. But, you think about it. Why was a tree that gives you a choice ever made? Who made that tree? Was the tree a defiance of God and Jesus? Obviously, the devil possessed a snake and was in that tree and lured Adam and Eve to eat of that tree, didn't he? Did he make that tree, maybe? I don't know. Does the Bible say he did, that God made all the trees? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But that's for your further research. Now, the Bible does tell us that Jesus was God's only begotten son. So that would exclude Satan, right? Because you can't have 2 only begotten sons, right? So let's keep going. because what seems obvious to me is that these three lizards that you're about to see are the unholy trinity, which would probably be like the devil, his son, and maybe demon possession. And believe it or not, they do rule time here. You've heard the devil say, time is on my side. You know, the Ouroboros is a snake eating its tail, which is time. So in some way, they have time. They are responsible for the timeline. There they show the time branches branching off here.
Three magic lizards
Timekeepers,
created the TVA, and everyone in it,
Right.
including you.
including me.
Three magic lizards.
So these are the three magic lizards. These are statues of them. And Loki exposes them as androids. They confront them, and they chop the head off of one of them, and it's an android. And they find the three android lizards first, and then they find the timekeeper who made the android lizards. It's kind of a cover story that people would believe. But when they find these androids, they're sitting in front of another rune symbol called an Odal or an opal.
Is it just me, or does this office keep getting better and better?
So these are the three magic lizards. They're androids, and they're sitting in front of what's called an opal or an Odal. Now, what is up with the OP word, or the letters OP or OPH? It means serpent, or knowledge, or the opening of the eyes, being able to see. Now, what do I think this means? Well, I think this means being able to see or know good and evil. That's what it really means. This isn't about being like gods and having knowledge, because that was a lie. The lie was that they would be like gods and be able to do what gods do. Yes, they would know good and evil in terms of being able to do good or evil in that tree, but they couldn't do the rest of the things that God does, you see? So it was a partial lie that the devil told Eve. In other words, when we entered this dimension through birth, the restrainer was released, and now we're able to know sin. It's pretty simple when you break it all down. But this is what I believe was happening, and this is where this root word OD or OPH comes from. This is where you get the words ophthalmologist, which is the eyes. This is where you get opium, or opining, which means opening the mind. This is where you get words like obstetrician, which is the opening of the womb, or OBGYN. And if you look at this symbol, you can almost see, if you were to flip this to the left, you could see that it almost looks like an eye opening. It's a simple box with an open end. An eye opening. Now, this symbol has some dark history to it, because the man whose name rhymes with Mittler, he used this symbol during the Second World Conflict. And in fact, now this symbol is outlawed in that country. We also saw this symbol appear on the CPAC stage. Remember that? From which the T-Man spoke. And of course, their cover story is that they had no idea that they were doing that they were simply using it because it made a good floor layout. And they're claiming they had no idea that the stage came out like that, as you can see here on the Wikipedia page. So you have to make your own decision about what you think is the truth on that. I think they do these things on purpose to stir the pot. That's my personal feelings on this. Okay. To embolden certain groups when they want to stoke the flames. So, let's get back to this. Now, the series ends. We're getting close to the end here. The series ends with Loki waking up in an alternate timeline in which the timekeeper regains control. Let's watch.
Gracious timekeepers.
There you see the opal or the obal symbol. Odal, sorry. Here in Loki's name. Now, this is also, it also says in here that this is a rune, sorry, not a rune. This is an omega symbol. Omega. Alpha and omega, right? And it does look like an omega symbol, doesn't it? So this may be the roots of the actual omega symbol.
As promised, the variants.
At last, you've arrived before us.
3 magic lizards.
What do you have to say for yourself before you meet your end variants?
So, here at the end, like I said, this ends with Loki waking up in this alternate timeline. The timekeeper regains control. You saw the giant image of him. And down below, you see the numbers 237, but they're scrambled. Now, what is 237? Many of you have asked me what this is. This is the number of the beast. So, the cage is our time prison. And remember the key in the door, in the locked door, in the hotel room of the film The Shining? And it was, the room number was 237, and there was a key in the door. And Danny was trapped in there with this woman who basically was decomposing. And she was in a green room. Well, 237 is the rib cage. It is your cage, your time prison. As long as you stay trapped in the flesh, you stay trapped in time. What am I talking about? Well, in that order, 2, 3, and 7, these are the descriptions of your 3 different types of ribs. You have 2 false ribs in blue. You have 3 floating or false ribs. Wait, I'm sorry. You have 2 floating ribs. You have 3 false ribs in green, and you finally have 7 true ribs for a total of 12. Now, the Bible tells us you can only enter heaven in the Spirit. Except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. We have to shed our flesh suits, don't we? Be born a different way. So, that was pretty much it. Now, what are the deceptions going on in Loki? Because I had to think about that for a minute. We can't just decode things and not talk about how people are being tricked, right? So, what were my impressions after watching the entire series? Well, you get the impression that nothing that you do matters, is what they want to leave you with the feeling of. That time does what it wants. And that it also corrects itself when things go wrong. They also program you to believe that there really is no difference as to what path that you take. You can choose the good path or the evil path, and that it doesn't really matter. These are some of the deceptions going on in this series. And of course, they also seed people's minds to consider that God might also be the devil. And that is a deception going around. I've been hearing it a lot lately. On my channel, my comment sections, people say evil is not real. And of course, this isn't true, but there's this growing movement to deceive people into believing this. Now, there's another lie that's in the series as well, is that they try to depict God as incapable, weak, kind of a Wizard of Oz figure, barely holding on to control and power through illusion. And that if we would all just, or that if he would just let it all go, that we would probably be better off and be able to fend for ourselves if he would let go of power control. More deception, right? There's also a strong reincarnation element to the series. They want you to believe that if you don't get it right this time, you'll just go back around the next time. They also lead you to believe that if you die, that you don't really die, that there's always another try. There's always another way back into the time loop. And again, this is deception, which gives people a false sense of security to be able to sin at will or do without will, wreck their bodies, wreck their minds, and just go for pleasure instead of doing the right thing. The book of Hebrews says that it is appointed for man to only die once. So, Loki is depicted as the devil, of course, and he's depicted as clever, intelligent, and charming, with a lot more character and likability than some of the other characters who have authority over the timeline. And at the end, you think, well, maybe we're better off letting Loki run everything. And so basically the series gets people rooting for the devil. So now you understand why it's so important to decode these kinds of series, because they are full of deception and programming. And there are a lot of children watching these series because this is the Marvel universe, right? And so when you hear your children saying things like, why can't God just leave the devil alone? Or why does it have to be God's way all the time? Is there a better way? How do we know God's right? What if he's wrong? Some of you have heard your children say this to you. Well, where does that mindset come from? It comes from watching series like this. And if you don't have an answer for them, then the seed that was planted by these kinds of series will grow into full-scale rebellion. And that's when they just go all in with life. They get addicted to things and they don't really care. They start having sympathy for the devil. So that's why we do these decodes. So you could see how obsessed that the enemy is with the Most High. I just showed you direct biblical references in the series. But they're trying to retell the story, are they not? So you got to be equipped with the understanding to counter the programming. If you're going to let your children watch stuff like this, then you need to counter the programming. You could say, you can use this as a learning opportunity. Say, look at how they depict Loki. He's the devil. Look how they're depicting him. And then they can be unbrainwashed. Now, I'm going to end the show with, for those of you that stuck to it, a little bit of a treat that I wasn't going to cover, but we'll cover it anyway. So, this is new. Now, somebody sent this to me. Let's see how new this is. Okay, so this is August 4th, 2021. So this is just recently. Archaeologists are claiming that they found the first ever image of the Tower of Babel. And this is what it looks like. But I think this is hogwash, and I'll tell you why in a second. So this is supposed to be the Tower of Babel, right? Inscribed on this stone. Now, here's what I really think this is. 5G Whiz programming. Why? Because the first two levels are 5 and 7 squares. And look at the top. Looks a lot like a 5G Whiz tower, doesn't it? I don't know what they call these. Are these called repeaters or whatever they are? But I think this is a big joke. And these are towers, by the way. These 5G Whiz towers or antennas. So I thought you guys would get a kick out of this. The programming never stops. This looks like a cartoon that like a 5-year-old drew, right? So this is just mockery. World domination and control. And on a spiritual level, really what this represents is 5G Wiz will recombine the languages all into one, right? Because in real time, you'll be able to translate someone's voice and stuff like that, whatever language they're speaking. It'll be like in those old Star Trek films where whatever they're saying automatically translates into your language. So this is defiance of God, is what this is really all about. All right, let's go back into the chat here. Thanks everybody for showing up on a Monday. Okay, wow, that was a lot of show, wasn't it? Now, some of you believe Loki is the T-Man, and I wouldn't be opposed to believing that. The Joker, the trickster, the clown. Now he's saying that he is the father of the sticker. He's admitting it. Now, we already know that they got the sticker. I was shocked that some people didn't know this, that they already got the sticker. And if you're quick to call this fake news, understand that he has not said anything about this. He could have corrected the record when he was at CPAC, right? Could have corrected the record. He could have said, yeah, they're spreading this fake news saying that the M and I got the sticker already and we didn't get it. No, he did get it. And he got it way back in March 2021. And so now he's claiming to be the father of all this. So so we're at the point now where you can't still like this person, but yet be mad about everything we're going through with the sticker. You can't serve two masters. You have to accept what has happened. That this man made the sticker at warp speed. And they already knew the plan was to give it to everybody. And he's bragging about it now. So now you have your answer. The truth has finally come out. But sadly, some people will take the lesser of two evils. This is what we're trained and programmed to do, instead of rejecting the entire system of control. I don't buy any of it. My allegiance is to the Most High and His Son. All right, what else do we have here? So I'll put all of those, all of these tabs in links in the pinned comment for those of you that are interested in going back and looking at that. We got a lot of stuff to go over tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think we're going to be looking at Travelers, which is another series that predated the Spamdemic, yet it was all about the Spamdemic. So we're going to do Travelers. I've actually got a second part, a part 2 Travelers. That's going to be uploading at 10 o'clock this morning. So in another 40 minutes, that's going to upload. So I'll see you guys over there. And then we'll cover both parts 1 and 2 tomorrow in a full live show. And of course, we've got more reading between the headlines. You guys can see all the tabs there. Got about 10 or 15 tabs already pulled up for that. And then on Friday, guess what we're going to do? We're going to watch a full-length movie called Time Travelers. We're going to watch it together and decode it together. I've only gotten to the first 15 minutes, but in the first 15 minutes, they talk about a spear in the chest, a serpent in the chest. They talk about a worldwide flu spamdemic, and they go back in time to solve it. Now, this is here on YouTube. I don't see any cost for this, so this may be in the public domain, which means we can decode it. If I catch a copyright on it, no big deal. Whatever, YouTube gets paid. But this will be fun to do. It's only an hour long. We can stop and do some commentary and critique this film. I'm not going to watch any more of it until I watch it with you guys on Friday. So, a lot to cover. I've scheduled all these live streams, so if you see them, make sure you set your reminders so you don't miss them. Love each and every one of you. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Take care and be